The job preparation, the opportunity for families to move forward to better jobs and stronger families, something we're all for, something we need to work for. And there are times when we're not going to agree, but I think we do agree on the importance of that goal. Right now, back to my comments about regulation, there are more than 70 new regulations on the department's to-do list for the last few months of the administration, regulations that frankly, this administration won't have to live with the results of. Somebody else is going to have to live with the results of those regulations. As we're talking today, there are 3 new regulations pending at the Office of Management and Budget that conservatively, according to the agency's own estimate, would cost the economy about $3 billion. I think at least one of these, the one on silica, has not been subjected to a full small business impact process in over a decade, and even that was associated with a different version of the rule. Mr. Secretary, can you talk to me a little bit about your process of developing the cost, and I may come back to that topic a little later, but also of developing the cost-benefit analysis of a rule that might add a little bit to the workplace, but the benefit not equal to the cost of implementing that rule. How do you all evaluate that at a time when the economy is struggling to move forward?
Well, whether it's silica conflict of interest or the Section 503, which related to the employment of people with disabilities and veterans, we have the same approach, which is you build a big table, an inclusive table. You take the time necessary to listen and to learn from people, and you make sure you bring a healthy dose of humility to the process. And so you look at the silica rule, for instance. That 80 years ago, 2 weeks ago, 80 years ago, Frances Perkins held a conference at the Department of Labor on the dangers of silica, and we have the grainy video of her opening remarks. And so we've known about silica as a killer for literally 8 decades or more. And so what we did in this process was not only to follow the SBREFA requirements, but we had an extensive pre-notice comment process of interaction with NIOSH and others because we wanted to understand the science. Then we had the formal rulemaking, which included lengthy hearings at the Department of Labor. And it's been a very, very extensive and inclusive process. Same thing in the conflict of interest process. I pride myself in the fact that it's really important to listen to people and to conduct and subject our rules to very rigorous analysis. And I would note, this is an op-ed that Secretary Tom Ridge wrote in the Wall Street Journal. Business and government working together, really. And it was in the aftermath of our 503 regulation, where there was a lot of concern that we were imposing quotas on employers to employ veterans and people with disabilities. And what he said was the Labor Department's rulemaking process should be a model for how government can work with stakeholders in crafting regulations that are practical and effective. That's Secretary / Governor Ridge, and that's what we aspire to do.
I think we are for practical and effective, and we work with you hard to do things that create new pathways for veterans to get their skills recognized in the workplace and to get to the workplace in new ways and to have that recognized. But on one of the rules, the overtime rule, for instance, I hear a lot from higher education about that rule, the not-for-profit sector, more than I do from the for-profit sector. When the Missouri Baptist Children's Home was in, they said, almost none of our counselors are at the $50,000 level, but they're available all the time. They're not called all the time, but they're available all the time. We don't see how we're going to be able to comply with that rule. Or I had the people from Southeast Missouri State University in this week who believe that the rule will cost them approximately $2.7 million. $2.5 million of that is the impact on nearly 31% of their faculty and staff. People that are like in the residence hall, the RAs in the residence hall. We don't seem to see the kind of exemptions for an RA in the residence hall or a counselor at the Missouri Baptist Children's Home. Are you looking at those problems and how particularly not-for-profits and educational institutions will deal with this rule?
The short answer is yes, we received comments there. And before we went to the formal rulemaking, we did about a year of informal outreach, and I personally participated in that. We met with retailers. We met with folks in the nonprofit world. We met with folks in higher ed. We met with SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, and many other people, because we wanted to learn about what their experiences were. We wanted to learn how they adjusted to the 2004 changes that were significant that the Bush administration made, so that we could go to school on that. And we've gotten comments from nonprofits supporting the rule. There have been comments from nonprofits expressing concerns about the rule. And we're taking all the comments, roughly 300,000 in total, into careful account as we craft a final proposal. And I would be glad at the conclusion of the process to come and brief anyone and everyone who is interested, so that you understand the decisions we made, the changes we made, and the various ways in which compliance can be obtained.
Well, we may very well ask you to do that, and
be honored.
glad you're willing to. And
Sure.
the question we want to ask now, but the question I have is the one step from $23,660 as the amount of money that if you were below that, you were subject to overtime and you were not an exempt employee, in one step to $50,440. I don't want to take other people's time for you to answer that now, but I may come back to why that kind of increase in one regulatory jump. Senator Murphy.